Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes or no, quickly for the three of you, just for the record, is the China investment into the Panama Canal a direct threat to U.S. national security? Yes or no? Mr. Solis, start with you down the panel. Thank you.
I don't have that information as an industry trade association senator.
Okay. All right. And we've talked some about the neutrality treaty, which I think is of concern to all of us. And as I have looked at this, and I appreciated Senator Sullivan's questioning on this, we look at how President Trump is going to push forward with getting this issue addressed. And we have heard a good bit about this from our shippers that are looking at what happens coming out of the port of Memphis. And I think that the government of Colombia learned a lesson last week that we are not going to go soft on some of these issues. And when you look at the fact that the U.S. is a primary user, it is the primary user of the Panama Canal. And we are also Panama's largest provider of direct foreign investment. I think those two things should be significant. Our foreign investment into Panama is $3.8 billion annually. This is why people are looking at this issue. So, Professor, let me come to you on this, and we thank you for joining us remotely. Shouldn't our investment in Panama be contingent on their adherence to that neutrality committee, ensuring that Panama and Panama alone would control that canal?
So certainly that is an action we can take to enforce the treaty and to enforce our understanding of the treaty. That's an action we can take even without the treaty. Right. So to the extent that the United States considers the Chinese operation of facilities around the canal to be against its interests, it can certainly condition aid and economic relationships on the exclusion of China. Now, the United States has typically not worked that way. And that may be one of the reasons why, as we heard in the testimony, China has basically made inroads everywhere. But for that, we don't even need the treaty. Certainly, if we consider the treaty to be violated, measures like that, far short of the armed force authorized by the treaty, would be reasonable and
Professor,
productive
let me
places to start.
interrupt you there because I do want to move on. I think that as you look at how China has used the Belt and Road Initiative, and we've talked some about that this morning, we know that they have pushed the digital yuan. And I am concerned that given their control over much of that infrastructure around the canal, that they would attempt to force U.S. shippers or our allies to bypass the dollar and use the digital yuan as they are in other countries where they're practicing debt diplomacy and where they're expanding the Belt and Road Initiative. So, Chairman Sola, could you speak for a moment about the potential for fee manipulation with the CCP? Because, as I mentioned, we are hearing a good bit about that. We are hearing that the toll structure disadvantages U.S. companies, that the Canal Authority has begun charging millions of dollars to skip the queue, and these fees put many bulk shippers in an adverse position, and these bulk shippers have a huge impact on ports along the lower Mississippi River. And, you know, these exorbitant fees are there unless you're going to face delays at the canal. And then the impact of hearing these Chinese companies would preference the yuan as opposed to the dollar.
Thank you, Senator. The fees that I think we are looking at, or we have been looked at, or the reason that we went there was because of the auctioning of the slots. And so what Panama did is they had a smaller percentage, maybe 20% allocation and then they moved it up to 30% and 40% because it became a moneymaker for them. So as they reduce...
Okay, and let me interject here. The auctioning of the slots gives these the right to skip the queue.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so just for the record there, continue.
So the auctioning of the slot, under maritime law, it's first come, first served, but Panama's always put a certain percentage aside. And they started to put more and more. So we got a lot of complaints. We got a lot of complaints from LNG carriers that paid $4 million to go through. And we got a lot of complaints from agriculture that didn't have the money to pay to go through because their goods were gonna go down. So if you look at the financial statements, I'm a nerd, I look at financial statements of everybody. But the canal increased the amount of revenue that they had from about $500 million to $1.8 billion in the last 3 years, just because of those fees. So this is what is very concerned to us and for the American shipper.
And have you seen a tendency to preference the digital yuan over the dollar?
I've heard of the digital yuan, and I've also heard of it used in international shipping as a currency. It is something that I would say that we have an eye on because we have a digital shipping exchange rule coming up, but we will keep monitoring it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I can't help but think, as we